Over 2,500 years ago, the Chinese military strategist and philosopher Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, which isn't just a manual of strategies for physical battle, but also psychological operations as well. He formulated tactics to both intimidate the enemy and encourage people to support a conflict. Since then, war propaganda has advanced in step with technology, and now instead of a group's leader giving an impassioned speech to their citizens in the town square about the need to go to war, now they do it through newspapers, radio, television, and of course, social media. William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer were partially, if not largely, responsible for the start of the Spanish-American War in 1898 because their newspapers sensationalized and misreported an incident after a U.S. ship, the USS Maine, blew up in Havana Harbor in Cuba. The explosion was just an accident, but two of America's most popular newspapers at the time, the New York Journal, owned by Hearst, and New York World, owned by Pulitzer, whipped the American people into a frenzy by publicizing misinformation about the explosion and blamed it on the Spanish for allegedly bombing the ship. Both Hearst and Pulitzer used their papers to call for war, and historians often use their sensational stories about the incident as examples of yellow journalism and propaganda. But unfortunately, this would become just one of many examples of disinformation being used to convince Americans to support going to war. Both liberal and conservative mainstream media in America endlessly repeated the fear-mongering false claims of the Bush administration about the non-existent weapons of mass destruction Saddam Hussein supposedly had, and hyped up the looming war in Iraq as if it were an exciting plot in a Hollywood thriller. A few years after the war started, many Americans started doubting the reasons for it, and people's skepticism fueled a closer look at why we were really there. One of the reasons for going to war was that he allegedly had acquired or was manufacturing weapons of mass destruction, the WMDs. The documents that purported to show Saddam had attempted to purchase the yellow cake uranium, which is used to build nuclear weapons, turned out to be forged, and if the documents were real, it would have been proof that Iraq had been in violation of the United Nations sanctions. But at least a year after the Bush administration knew that they were fake, they kept using them to build support for the invasion. Unfortunately, every mainstream television network seemed to support the looming war. It wasn't just the forged documents that got us there, they were just one part of an international propaganda campaign trying to make it happen. The CIA's British counterpart, MI6, was found to have planted propaganda pieces in the media in the UK and other parts of the world, claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in order to drum up support for the war in what was dubbed Operation Mass Appeal, to help shape public opinion about the supposed threat that Iraq posed by having WMDs. At the onset of the Iraq War in 2003, the Department of Defense paid Iraqi newspapers to publish stories supporting the US invasion, which were written by Americans but appeared as if they were Iraqis. A year before the 9/11 attacks, it was also discovered that soldiers from the US Army Psychological Operations Group had been working undercover at CNN and NPR. Phil Donahue was fired by MSNBC in February 2003, less than a month before the invasion of Iraq, which he was very much against. The network claimed that this happened because he had low ratings, but he was actually the highest rated show on MSNBC at the time, and later an internal memo leaked that said that he was, quote, a difficult public face for NBC in a time of war, thus confirming that he was fired for opposing the planned invasion of Iraq. Years later, he would discuss the obvious reason for his cancellation, saying this.
The biggest lesson, I think, is how corporate media shapes our opinions and our coverage. The decision to release me came from far above. This was not an assistant program director who decided to separate me from MSNBC. They were terrified of the anti-war voice, and that is not an overstatement. Anti-war voices were not popular. And if you're General Electric, you certainly don't want an anti-war voice on a cable channel that you own. Donald Rumsfeld is your biggest customer.
General Electric was the co-owner of MSNBC at the time, and GE has been a major manufacturer of military products, by the way, for the military-industrial complex. Several years after the invasion, public opinion on the war in Iraq dramatically changed as the reasons for getting involved kept falling apart. But people have short memories, and as the years passed, after George W. Bush's presidency ended and he was replaced by Obama, the anger about the deceptions that led to the war quietly faded. And well over 4,000 U.S. soldiers have been killed in Iraq alone, not to mention countless who have been injured, with many having missing limbs and being permanently disabled, all with nobody in the government or the media held accountable for the lies which caused it all. The neocons had been hoping for the day when they could start another war in the Middle East, and George W. Bush even floated the idea of painting a drone like a UN plane and baiting Saddam Hussein into shooting it down by flying it into his airspace so the U.S. could justify the invasion. Instead, the WMD hoax was cooked up and the rest is history. But you're not supposed to know about history. The establishment wants you watching the Kardashians instead, or worried about which NFL team is better at chasing after a ball. And you're certainly not supposed to talk about Operation Northwoods or other false flags that have been contemplated or used to justify military interventions like the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And you're definitely not supposed to mention Operation Susanna, also known as the Lavon affair. You're never going to hear that on Fox News, and probably not OAN or Newsmax either. You'll just have to look that one up yourself, and you should. False flag operations are a staple of the military-industrial complex. During the George W. Bush administration, according to Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for The New Yorker, Dick Cheney proposed building 4 or 5 boats that looked like Iranian PT boats, and then wanted to stage a false flag in the Strait of Hormuz as a pretext to expand the war on terror into Iran. Thankfully, the idea was rejected, but Operation Northwoods, the 1962 false flag plan drawn up to justify an invasion into Cuba, was actually approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the only reason that it didn't happen is because the president at the time, President Kennedy, firmly rejected the proposal. Operation Northwoods documents had been declassified, and you can read them for yourself. Our government proposed committing terrorist attacks on American soil, which were then to be blamed on another country so that we could invade them. The documents are a horrifying read, and it's even more horrifying to know that the highest levels in our military actually approved that plan again, only to be stopped by President Kennedy. So it's no wonder that when people hear about the neocons' project for the New American Century document that outlined their agenda for the Middle East and lamented they wouldn't be able to do it absent a, quote, catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor, that so many Americans have a lot of questions about world-changing events and the supposed mistakes that enable them to occur, and wonder if sometimes the military-industrial complex is up to their old tricks again. This Labor Day weekend, you can get free shipping in the U.S. on any of my shirts from markdice.com by using the promo code LABOR-DAY, one word, Labor Day, at the checkout. So get yourself a Liberalism Find a Care shirt, a Trump Was Right shirt, and a Arrest Dr. Fauci shirt, or any of my awesome designs. Enter the promo code LABOR DAY at the checkout to get free shipping in the U.S. and check them out.